and welcome to the Transatlantic Sports Show. I'm your host, Anthony Wootton. You can follow me on X at AR The spelling is below. If you're listening, it's WOOTTON. And of course, you can follow us on social media, the Transatlantic Sports Show at TASS_UK. If you are listening and you want to give us a view, then please subscribe on YouTube. We are at TASS_UK there. Of course, if you're watching us on YouTube, which many of you are, then check us out on your favorite podcast provider. We'd love to join you on your morning walk, your commute, or on your run, however you consume your podcasts. Coming up on this episode, I'll be joined by Sumeet Jena from the Phinsider. We are going to be focusing on the Miami Dolphins, who will be hosting the 0-3 Tennessee Titans on Monday Night Football, but talking specifically about the future of their quarterback, Tua Tagovailoa, who is on injured reserve because he suffered his third concussion as a professional footballer back in week 2. He won't be able to play again or start a game for the Dolphins until week 8 at the earliest of this NFL season. But where does that put the Dolphins? Where do they stand in the hunt for the AFC? How much and how big is this game on Monday night against the Tennessee Titans? The Dolphins are 1-2 heading into week 4. We'll be discussing that. And of course, a whole lot of other stuff, including Sumeet's love of Chelsea. Stick around for my quirky tale involving myself and an encounter with their star man, Cole Palmer. More of that to come. But here it is, my interview with Sumeet Jena from the Phinsider. Delighted to say that I'm joined now by Sumeet Jena from the Phinsider. As I was saying, we're going to be discussing, unfortunately, the circumstances surrounding the Miami Dolphins quarterback, Tua Tagovailoa, and we'll look ahead to the AFC and, just discuss the overall AFC picture. I know we're only 3 weeks in, depending on when you listen to it. It might be week 4, and looking ahead to the NFL London games, which kick off in week 5. But Sumeet, thank you very much for joining us on the Transatlantic Sports Show.
Yeah, Anthony, very happy to be here. I'm excited to talk all things Dolphins, all things NFL. So yeah.
And a little bit of Chelsea as well, but we're just going to leave that there, by the way. Listeners and viewers, if you want to join in the Chelsea chat with Sumeet, then please follow him on social media, because his passion for the Dolphins is equaled by his love and passion for Chelsea. And some of those tweets are not for the faint-hearted, Sumeet. So if people wanted to join you on that Chelsea bandwagon, where should they go? How should they follow you?
Yeah, best way to follow me is just on Twitter, or X now as it's called, at FlameoSumeet. That's Flame O, and then just my name, Sumeet. So just give me a follow. I'll follow you back. I love talking all things Dolphins, all things Chelsea, just all sorts of sports. Basketball, when that starts, I'll be right in the thick of it again. So
excellent stuff. Well, look, yeah, Chelsea fans, or even if you just want to wind them up, let's say you're a Fulham fan or an Arsenal fan, you want to give them a follow, because it's great fun following you, Sumeet, on your whilst you're watching those Chelsea games. So even if you can't make the games and you can't get the commentary, you can follow it through Sumeet on X. So yeah, please give him a follow on Twitter or X, as he said. Sumeet, when I reached out to you initially, it was just after that Thursday Night Football game. Sadly, during week 2, it kicked off week 2, didn't it? When Tua suffered his third concussion as a professional footballer. It was sad, sorry scenes in that game, seeing him going off like that. And we all know the history connected with Tua. Like I said, it's his third concussion. And when I was reaching out to you, it was thoughts of, is there a future for him in the sport? Where does he go from here? We'd seen the press conferences from the head coach, Mike McDaniel, and rightly so, he was more concerned about the human element than the quarterback or the team or the sport element, because there is a really nice human being involved in this. And I can't overestimate that enough, how much of a decent, nice person Tua Tagovailoa is. I had I was very fortunate last year, almost 12 months ago, to spend quite a chunk of time with the Dolphins and Tua in Frankfurt. And the thing that impressed me most was just how humble and how much of a gentleman Tua is. So to see him go down the way he did was heartbreaking at that time. And I know the Dolphins were chasing your AFC East rivals, the Buffalo Bills, in that Thursday night football. But that aside, when you saw what happened to Tua, what were you feeling at that moment?
My first reaction was just like complete sadness. You know, you just feel it in your gut, just like a because as a fan, you just don't have control over these things. You know, you can hope and pray as much as you want, but we don't have control over what happens in the field. So it's kind of like you wish you could do something, but you just can't. So you're just sitting there on your couch, just sad, just depressed. And again, like you said, more so for Tua, less so for the Dolphins, because he is just a really, really good guy. Irrespective of whatever you think of how good he is of a quarterback, everyone that talks about him says he's just the absolute best guy, a true gentleman, like you said. And it was really sad just seeing him go down like that. And yeah, I just feel for him. And I know he's on IR and he may come back, he may not. So, you know, his injury history right now is just sort of gets muddier and muddier, you know. And I think the Dolphins as well as the NFL are probably reaching a point where they feel they may have to step in, they may have to make a firm decision on his health, on his career. I have my own personal opinions on it. I personally think that he should retire, but again, the decision lies with him and his family. He knows what's best for his family. Again, there's stuff with the contract, like if he retires, he's going to give up $140 million. If he doesn't, he'll get that money. So there's a lot of factors here in terms of, you know, the concussion itself and the long-term outlook for the Dolphins. Like I said before, I think he should retire, but it's just a very sad situation in general that we are at this point where this guy's 4 or 5 years into his NFL career, what he's been working towards since he was 10, 11 years old, and, you know, it could be stripped away from him. It's just a very sad feeling. And I think most Dolphins fans, even just NFL fans, probably share that sentiment. You know, you never want to see a player's career just taken from him. And yeah, it's just a very sad few weeks for the Dolphins, but hopefully he comes back. Hopefully he's healthy. I don't know. It's just a lot of uncertainty at the moment, which I think is, you know, somewhat warranted when you look at his injury history.
Yeah, I'd seen an update or comments from Adam Schefter from ESPN on Friday where he'd given an update on Tua. I think it was on the Pat McAfee show, and he said that Tua is determined to come back. The earliest that he can come back is week 8 because of he said he's on injured reserve, etc. So he's still got a few weeks. We're heading into week 4 now of this NFL season, but there was talk of him meeting the team and doctors and just discussing things. But it looks like, the team are handling it the right way. There's absolutely no pressure on him to return because of the severity of his injury. But it does look like Tua is keen to come back. It's just, I guess, from a Dolphins perspective, there's a human element that we've discussed there. But also by week 8, who knows where that team is in terms of the landscape for playoff contention,
Right, right.
unfortunately.
Yeah, that's something, you know, that I think needs to be considered as well. It's like if the Dolphins are going into week 8, week 9, you know, with 2 wins under our belt, and the second half of the season is not easy for Miami. We have to go to Green Bay, we have to go to Buffalo, we have to go to New York. You know, these are not easy games. And if you're looking at it and we're 2-6, 2-7, whatever, is it even worth bringing him back? Are we really going to win 8 games in a row, finish 10-7? You know, before the season, I had the Dolphins finishing 9-8, and I thought that was maybe a little bit pessimistic, but somewhat realistic. It's looking like that would be best case scenario is we win 9 games at this point without Tua. So that is a decision the Dolphins have to make. You know, if you are going into week 9, week 10, like we said, you know, with just 2, 3 wins, do you just sit him out for the season? Do you go into the offseason, try to get a quarterback? Um, you know, there's a lot of factors at play. It's a very, very interesting scenario because I think it's one that we've not seen in the NFL before where uh, we are almost reaching a point where a lot of people feel like the league has to step in and tell a player, hey, you can't play anymore. And as far as I know, that's never happened before. That's never happened where the league has come in and said, listen, you need to retire. You're not going to get medically cleared, you know? And a quarterback nonetheless of a pretty historic franchise. So it's a very big, story. So yeah, there's a lot of uncertainty, like you said. It's just I think all we can do right now, just as a fan, is just wait. You just have to wait and see. I know he wants to come back because he's a gamer, he's an athlete, that's his personality. he wants to come back and help this team and take him to the playoffs. But I think you have to look at the situation with a lot of realism, and just weigh out the pros and cons and say, is it worth risking my injury again and coming
Mm,
back to a team that, even if he does come back, may win 7 games and
yeah.
miss the playoffs, and then not even get a high draft pick to get him some offensive line help. We'll be in that 15 to 20 range, in the draft. It's like so many factors at play here. But again, like we said, his health is number one. Whatever the doctors feel and he feels is best for his health, I feel like that's the option that the team and he needs to take as well.
Yeah, in instances like this where you've got athletes involved, we all know that athletes, the reason why they are professional athletes is because they have that hunger, don't they? More so than your average person, which is how they got into the position where they are. But sometimes they can't help themselves because he has that winning instinct, and it might need somebody just to say, "Hey, look, you're only in your 20s, man, and you've had 3 concussions
Yeah.
already. Just think, you've made millions already. You've got the rest of your life to consider and think about here." And I'm sure that's what's going on behind the scenes. And hopefully he'll make the decision that's best for him and also for the franchise. Although he doesn't owe the franchise anything at this
Right.
stage. But it looks like the franchise feels exactly the same. It's looking after, because well, he's not a kid, but a very very young adult. He's a guy who's in his mid 20s.
Yeah, I think both parties want to take care of the other, in the sense that I think Tua doesn't want to let the fans down. He doesn't want to let the organization down. And I think he feels somewhat guilty if he retires. I think there is some of that in him. Obviously, I don't know him. I don't know what his party is saying, but it does feel like he doesn't want to let anyone down, his teammates down most of all. And I also think the Dolphins kind of want to do right by him. They kind of, want to pay him what he deserves, but they also don't want to risk his health anymore. If they don't risk his health, they're kind of off the hook for the contract, as far as I know. There's a lot of, factors there, some clauses about if he's forced to retire. But they also want to do right by him. I know Chris Greer really likes him. I know Mike McDaniel really likes him. The whole organization is just behind him, and it's very like touch and go, very touchy-feely. It's a very just delicate situation. So I mean, we'll have to see what happens. It's going to be at least a few weeks, I think, before we can even discuss Tua's return to the field as a starter. So we'll have to see. Again, I think it really does boil down to, if the team is somewhat competitive with a backup quarterback, looks like at this point it'll be Tyler Huntley.
Mm.
I think that may push the team to say, look, we're 2-2 with Tyler as a starter. We're 3-2 with Tyler. Let's throw Tua in. Let's see if we can make the playoffs. And I think it may come down to that. We'll have to see. But yeah, it's a few weeks off, so we'll have to see.
Yeah, one of those games where you'd be looking at and you would be hoping that the team could get to 500 will be on Monday night, because you've got the 0-3 Tennessee Titans coming into town. I found this stat looking ahead to this game, and the Dolphins, it says, have allowed at least 100 rushing yards in each of their last 5 games. They're 4-5 when they've allowed so many since the start of last season, but they're 8-3 when they've held opponents under 100 rushing yards. And so, how do they clean this up? Because that's 5 games in a row now where they've allowed 100 plus rushing yards. Okay, they have won one of those, the week one opener against the Jacksonville Jaguars, but luck went their way as well, with Travis Etienne fumbling as he was
Yeah.
about to cross the plane.
I think a lot of it boils down to the old saying where, they say offense is the best form of defense.
Mm,
I think teams run the ball down Miami's throat because they're just up early. The Jags went up early. They were up 2 scores, 14-0. So they were gonna run the ball. They wanted to, waste some time, chew the clock a little bit. But if Miami goes up, 13-0, 14-0, 10-0, you're gonna force these teams to throw the ball. And I think we're at the point now where, look, the offseason is gone. You had the chance to build your run defense then, right? You're not going to fix it now. It is what it is at this point, and injuries will probably only make it worse, right? Like, the team decided to let Andrew Van Ginkel go. Decided to let Christian Wilkins go. Better or worse, you got to live with that decision. You've already made it, right? So I think the options now for Miami to sort of stop Tennessee's rushing attack, and Tony Pollard and Tyjae Spears, is get up early, force Will Levis to throw the ball. We've seen that this guy is a pretty below average NFL quarterback, if not, I don't want to be harsh, but if not one of the worst starting quarterbacks in the league. So if you force him to throw 35, 40 times, the Titans are probably going to lose, but if you let him get up early and you let him play the game on their terms.
Mm.
That's, I think, what's happened to Miami this season. They've just let teams come to their home stadium and just play how they want to play, not how the Dolphins want to play. So I think if the key is just getting up early on offense, because I think that's the best way to sort of stop someone's running attack is force them to throw the ball. And Will Levis is not a great passer, so that is probably the best route for the Dolphins to stop, Tennessee's rushing attack and hopefully come away with the win.
My guest right now is Sumeet Jena from the Phinsider. Sumeet, I wanted to get your thoughts on your head coach, Mike McDaniel. He's clearly a dude and an offensive genius. When I was in Frankfurt, like I said earlier, and had the luxury of pretty much hanging with the Dolphins for a few days over there before the Chiefs arrived on the Friday. So I had a Wednesday and Thursday practice, as well as the press conferences and chance encounters to interview some of the guys connected with the Dolphins. And the vibe I got from Mike McDaniel and from his team and staff is that there is a lot of respect there for him. You just listen to him talk. The guy loves a podium, doesn't he? He loves a microphone. He probably loves it more than I do. He could present probably a 4-hour podcast without even pausing for breath. But with that comes respect, like I said, from his staff and from his players, and the way that he's handled the Tua situation, as we mentioned at the top of the show. As far as he is as a head coach and some of the decisions that he makes and his game management, where do you sit, or where do you lie on the Mike McDaniel bandwagon train, I guess?
Yeah, for me, Mike McDaniel is probably the best Dolphins coach of my lifetime. I was born in 2002, not to date anyone, but I've seen, since I was sort of following the Dolphins, I've seen Tony Sperano, I've seen Joe Philbin, Adam Gase, Brian Flores, and now Mike McDaniel. Of that bunch, I think McDaniel is far and away the best head coach the Dolphins have had. It's not a coincidence that since he's been here, we've made the playoffs in back-to-back years. And yes, we've lost both times, but making the playoffs in back-to-back years is something the Dolphins haven't done since 2001 and 2002, right? Since those Dave Wannstedt years, right? So, in my opinion, he is the best Dolphins coach of my lifetime. And like you said, he is an offensive guru. He's an offensive genius. And I think Dolphins fans who are a bit frustrated with him and a bit, you know, pessimistic about the team's chances with him are, I think they need to step back and just evaluate and look at it with a clear head. Yes, we're all pretty upset that we're 1-2 and the team's future looks pretty bleak. And yes, he does have things to fix. I think he struggles a little bit with in-game adjustments. I think he ignores the run a little bit too much, which is strange because he comes from being a run coordinator with the 49ers.
Mm.
And I think he doesn't, this season especially, he struggled to get the ball into our best players' hands. I think he struggled to get the ball to Jalen Waddle last year, even this year, Tyreek Hill this year. And I think the team are a little soft under him. I know our practices are very, very light, which is a reason a lot of players like him. But on Sundays, on game days, that I think seeps into some of the team. I think we struggle late in games. I think we struggle in November and December. All that's been said about, Dolphins can't beat teams over 500, all that stuff is sort of true. However, everything that goes in his favor is just hard for me to ignore. The Dolphins had the best offense in the NFL last season, right? Even with all the injuries the Dolphins have had. I've never seen a Dolphins offense put up 30, 40, 50, 60, 71 weeks
70,
on
yeah.
teams. I mean, I feel like it's hard to look past it in an era where offenses are so dominant and offenses win championships as opposed to the old mantra of defenses win championships, right? I think it'd be really hard for the Dolphins to this won't happen because he signed a new contract, but I know I've seen a lot of fans sort of calling for his head. If the Dolphins fired Mike McDaniel, 10 teams would be calling him on the phone tonight, right? And trying to get him to coach for them. So I think my thoughts on him are just that he's a very good coach, but he's a very young coach. And the things that he's bad at are things that coaches usually develop over time. I remember when Andy Reid was in Philadelphia, the big thing with him was clock management. He couldn't manage the clock. He struggled with challenges. Well, that reminds me of Mike McDaniel. He struggles with in-game adjustments. He struggles to win challenges. I think he's won one challenge in his NFL career. But these are things you develop with time. You get better as a coach with time. You learn how to navigate game states. You learn when to challenge, when not to challenge, when to call a timeout, all this sort of stuff. So I am a big fan of him. And I know people are, when we're winning, they love his press conferences. He's very quirky. When we're losing, it's a bit like, but I think that's not fair on us because you have to take the good and the bad. That's who he is. He's being authentic, right? So win or lose, he is being himself, and I think that's something Dolphins fans should get behind because too often I've seen a coach get up there and just coach speak right for an hour and not give you anything of value. I think McDaniel, for better or worse, is a very authentic dude, and I think players like him, the GM likes him, the quarterback likes him, a lot of fans like him, and I just think he's a very young, promising, good coach. And I don't think that's a very controversial opinion. I think a lot of people would agree. And he has faults, but I just think he is someone you build your franchise around. If Tua is here next year, if he's not here, whatever, I think McDaniel is the guy you keep. Even if we decide to rebuild the team and just sort of tear it down and go again, I think you got to keep McDaniel because he is hard to come by. You just won't find coaches that can go from coordinator to head coach and do so well like he's done. His first three games in his coaching career, he beat Bill Belichick, John Harbaugh, and Sean McDermott, right? This is not an easy feat. You can't go call any offensive coordinator and expect them to do that, right? I think people underestimate the jump from coordinator to head coach. And the Dolphins have found a coach who can do that. And I think we're getting a little carried away with expectations. And, we sort of assumed like by this point in year three, we'd have won a division title, won a playoff game, made a Super Bowl run. And I understand none of that's happened. It's pretty frustrating. But I just see too many positives as a Dolphins fan to suggest that we should move on in any sense of the word. Um, and yeah, I am personally a big fan of him. I don't know if Dolphins fans would agree, but I am. So yeah, those are basically my thoughts on him. That he's a very good young coach, but has some adjustments he needs to make as he progresses.
Yeah, that's what I got from him in Frankfurt is that he's a different guy, but I like his unique approach to game management, not just game management, but also, his job as a head coach. His press conferences are refreshing, and he brings a whole refreshing approach to the game. And also, look at his history, look at the troubles that he's been through historically. But the guy's a winner. He's come through severe adversity in his own personal life, and the guy he just seems like a natural leader of this team, and he's commanding the respect, as we've said, of his team and his coaches. So you've got that winning mentality and this unique offense, this exciting offense and brand of football that he's bringing for the Dolphins. So I'm with you. I think he's a very good head coach, and you guys should stick with him. He's young, and that you've got this team that can grow and a franchise that can grow with this very exciting head coach. A head coach that, if the Dolphins do beat the Titans on Monday Night Football prime time, they'll go to 500 and remain at least 2 games behind the leaders in the NFC, depending on how results go elsewhere in the AFC this weekend. I said NFC, but in the AFC. I just wanted to gauge your perspective on the AFC and the lay of the land, because it's been, I guess no surprise that the Chiefs are 3-0, but their performances have been surprising and a little underwhelming. The Bills look very, very dominant. They've exceeded my expectations from the start of the season. But then you look at the Ravens, and the Bills are going to Baltimore on Sunday Night Football, and the Ravens are only just 1-2, and they had an electric start against the Cowboys last week, but then took their foot off the gas. The Cowboys almost caught up to them, and they were close to perhaps taking it to overtime, if not beating the Ravens in that game. So Sunday Night Football between the Bills and the Ravens is going to be very interesting indeed. But you've got your normal powerhouses, contenders in terms of the Bills and the Chiefs. The Chiefs underwhelming, but you just know at some point something's going to click, and Mahomes and Kelsey and co are going to go riding off into January. But where do you stand with the AFC and the outlook? Granted that we've only, at time of recording, we've only had 3 weeks of football, and we're heading into week 4.
Yeah, I think, like you said, the usual suspects are at the top: Chiefs, Ravens, Bills. I think, and it pains me to say, I think this is the year that Buffalo are the team to beat. I think the playoffs will run through Buffalo. Like you said, the Chiefs are 3-0, but they feel weak in a way that they have not felt in years prior. It feels like there's weaknesses that can be exploited. They are no longer the team that will go on the road and put up 40 points. This, make no mistake about it, this is a very defense-oriented team. And I know because you have Kelsey and Mahomes and Pacheco, who just got hurt, and Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy, I think the perception is still like, oh, this is a high-flying offense, but it's really not. This team is run by Steve Spagnuolo and their defense. Their defense is the heart of this team. And I think people just give their offense a little bit too much respect in the sense that when teams line up against them, that fear factor is still there. It reminds me of how teams used to line up against, Brady and the Patriots, where it's like just the fact that you're playing the Patriots maybe cause you to play down a little bit. And I think people do that with the Chiefs. But I think Buffalo are the one team that if they get the Chiefs in the playoffs in Buffalo, I think this is probably the year they do it and they reach the Super Bowl. Because the Ravens, like you said, it felt like last year was their chance. The Chiefs, I don't know, maybe they do three-peat, but it just feels like we're deciding between those three teams. And I know the Texans are a team that a lot of people have thrown around. I think the Texans will probably be this year's AFC version of the Lions in the sense that they're a very young, exciting team that everyone can kind of get behind. But I think experience will, or the lack of experience will cost them, in November, December, January. Um, it just feels like the Bills in a very weak AFC East will probably go 5-1, maybe even 6-0, and maybe secure the number one seed. Whereas I see the Ravens, I think the Bengals might sneak a win. I think the
Mm.
Chargers could sneak a win this week. Jim Harbaugh, very, very good coach, makes games really ugly, very, 10-13, 14-10, these sorts of games. The Steelers could steal one from the Ravens. It just feels like Buffalo's chances now purely because the Dolphins don't seem like they can compete with Buffalo. And going 6-0 in your division is six free wins, and I think Buffalo will do that. And if the road goes through Buffalo, I think Buffalo is going to be, playing for silverware in mid-February. The Dolphins are firmly out of that conversation just because of Tua's injury. But yeah, I think the usual suspects, Ravens, Chiefs, Bills will be at the top. Texans, um, Jags, before the season, I was like, they could be a team. This is, and so far, that prediction looks like one of my worst yet. But yeah, it pains me to say, but Buffalo this could be their year. This could be their
Yeah,
year.
they look good. They look unstoppable at the moment, which is quite concerning for everybody else involved in the AFC and in the NFL. Could you imagine though if it's the Bills and the Vikings in the Super Bowl where they're both 0-4 in Super Bowls? Can you have a tie and can they share the trophy?
That
That's like,
that
whoa, there's a
story would
narrative.
be that story would be unbelievable because it's also Sam Darnold's
Yeah.
Vikings, right? A guy who is completely cast aside, bounced around three teams, the Jets, Panthers, the 49ers a little bit. For him to finally find a home in Minnesota, I'm actually very glad that he's doing well because I always sort of liked him, even as a Jets quarterback. I felt he wasn't really set up to succeed well.
Mm.
If that is a Super Bowl, Bills Vikings, I mean, that is something. Wow, that I would become a Vikings fan, a big Vikings fan that Sunday. So
That's a narrative to follow. There you go. We're starting it here on the Transatlantic Sports Show, Sumeet. Speaking of Sam Darnold and his Minnesota Vikings and one of your AFC East rivals, this week coming up, week 5 is NFL London week. There you go. You can smell it. It's not the tailgate, but it's the bacon and eggs and the sausages. It's the full English that we're going to have. The Viking invasion is coming. The Jets are landing. We've got back to back to back weeks of NFL action. 2 weeks starting off in October at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. We have the Jags over as the road team on the 13th of October, the second game, playing the Bears. They're going to stay over here, and then they head around North London to Wembley, where they will host another AFC East rival of yours in the New England Patriots. And we saw last year the advantage, the major advantage that the Jaguars had by having that week over here because they kicked off at Wembley with the win against the Falcons, and then the following week they beat the Bills at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. So a huge advantage for the Jags. So they're going to be looking to get at least 1, maybe 2 wins under their belt before they head over here, because if they can get a couple of wins and then they know what they can do with in terms of the advantage, the London advantage that they have, that could easily take them up to 4 wins for the season, and suddenly they're 4-3 coming away from London. But that is in the future. I am talking about the NFL London games, and your Dolphins are no strangers to NFL International. I'm wearing a hoodie of the NFL Germany game from last year. As I said, I was there, and I was at the game for the matchup with the Chiefs last November. But the very first NFL London game of course, involved your Miami Dolphins, and they've been over multiple times. So, as a Dolphins fan, how do you feel about the whole NFL International, and in particular, as far as we're concerned here in the UK and the Transatlantic Sports Show, these NFL London games?
I love it. I think the NFL is a sport that should be pushed internationally, if that makes sense. I think the nature of the sport is one that it is very commercialized. It is sort of a franchise, not like a club, not like a local, team like
Mm,
you'd see in English in football. So I think it's great. I love that we get to sort of share the game around the world. I love that we had games in Frankfurt, we had a game in Mexico, like all this sort of stuff. I think it's very good for the sport. I think it can't be a bad thing that more fans around the world are interested in the NFL and becoming fans and following their team from miles away. Like, I'm a Chelsea fan. I follow my team from, across the pond. So I think the chance for, people in the UK to do the same with, their NFL team is amazing. And I think I alluded to it earlier in the sense that I would not be a fan of Premier League clubs coming and playing games in like New York, LA, because I think it strips away what Americans like about soccer in the sense that it's very grassroots. It's very, you support your team, which your dad supported and their dad supported and their dad, right? But I think the NFL is a different sport. I think it's very, you see teams move around all the time. It's a very commercialized sport. And if that is the case, I don't think you lose any of the, magic of it by playing games in London. In a sense, I think you gain more. It's just more exciting to see fans all over the world watch the NFL. Any game that's held in London, you'll see like, let's say it's Jags Dolphins playing, you'll see a Giants jersey in the crowd, you'll see a Bengals jersey, you'll see a Cowboys jersey. These people, they just want to watch their sport in the same way that I would if a Premier League game was played here. And it's I think it's lovely. I think it's awesome that we get to showcase our game, quote unquote, to the world. And long may it continue. I really just think it's a great push that the NFL have done over the last 10, 15 years to sort of grow the game internationally. So I'm a big fan of it.
I think there's going to be more of it to come. There's going to be a week 18 before you know it, and that is going to allow teams the window and the opportunity to play internationally. You might see that who knows, it could be mandatory that each team plays an international game once a season because they're building up their collection of cities. We had Sao Paulo, didn't we? I know that was a bit controversial, that week one game, that Friday night game in Sao Paulo, but already looking ahead to next year, the Bernabeu, Real Madrid Stadium. There's going to be a game in Madrid, that is confirmed, and there's going to be 3 games in London, and then who knows elsewhere. We'll look and see what happens with Germany, but I don't think the NFL is going to go away from Germany. I've been fortunate enough to cover the games in Munich and in Frankfurt, and that German fan base is a whole different beast. They absolutely love their American football over there in Germany, hoping to get over to the it'll be interesting, the Munich game in week 10 this year, because it is the Panthers and the Giants, but I tell you what, they are going to be hungry and they're going to absolutely eat it up regardless of the matchup at the Allianz Arena where Bayern Munich play their football. Speaking of football, you mentioned there that you are a Chelsea fan. At time of recording, we just witnessed Cole Palmer score 4 goals for the Blues against Brighton. A bit of a shock start to that game, seeing Brighton take the lead in the old Graham Potter derby, as it was once called. But look, I have an interesting story to tell with regards to Cole Palmer. So at the end of last season, it was a hot day in May at Stamford Bridge. I was there covering Chelsea against Bournemouth, and the sun was beating down in the press box. We're just behind the dugout. So if you look carefully on the TV when they were cutting to Poch, at the time there were question marks around his future. And behind you could see me sat there. Anyways, that's by the by. I covered the game. We had the press conference, spoke to Pochettino, all that. Saw Reece James limping through the press lounge, and I was saying to people, he's not going to be playing for a while. And they say, well, no, he's through his injuries. Like, no, the way that Reece James is walking, he's not going to be playing for a while. Guess what? He's not going to be playing for a while. But as I left Stamford Bridge and I'm walking out, and I've got my my case with the camera next to me. It's like a trolley that you roll through an airport. And I'm walking out, and I look to my left, and walking right next to me was Cole Palmer. And as we're walking out towards the shed end where the players' car park is, there's a whole fence and a line of fans, and the fans are there with their banners and they're screaming and they're shouting. And I turned to him and said, "They're not here for you." And I got a laugh from Cole Palmer from my joke. He understood my gag. Off he went through to the car park. I don't know if he signed any autographs. I hope he did. But I shared that tale with my 10-year-old son, and he told his friends. And it was like I was an absolute hero because I walked out of Stamford Bridge with the growing legend that is Cole Palmer. That is my moment of glory at Stamford Bridge.
That's the dream, I think, to make Cole Palmer laugh. I think that's my goal as an aspiring journalist. If I can do the same, I think I'll say I've made it. So that is awesome.
There we were. We're watching the Euro 2024 final on the TV, and of course he scored for England. And
Yep.
I turned to my little 10-year-old like, "That's my guy." And like honestly, he absolutely he loves Cole Palmer. He's not a Chelsea fan, but he is a big fan of Cole Palmer. So he's
Yeah.
collecting the cards, and he's after there's a limited
Awesome.
edition Cole Palmer, but which is it's great. I mean, what were Man City thinking when they let him go?
I think it's actually what were Chelsea thinking when we bought him, because at
Well,
the
yeah.
time he was relatively unproven and we spent 30, 40 million on him, but I'm just so glad it's worked out. I mean, without him, this team would just be nowhere near the same. It's a once in a lifetime type transfer in the sense that that just doesn't happen. You just don't sign random academy products from other clubs and they just go on to be world-class players, score for England in a final. Just doesn't happen. I'm just very blessed that we have him at our club. So
I think I know this is the Transatlantic Sports Show, but hey, this is a sport that is crossing the pond, listeners and viewers to the Transatlantic Sports Show. But yeah, I think he is the most gifted of the England players, the three lions
yeah,
that we have available in the squad. The guy is a unique talent. The first time that I saw him in the flesh was around Christmas time last season, where Chelsea won. They were 3-0 up. They won 3-2 at Kenilworth Road against Luton, and I remember just
yep,
watching that and it's like, this guy's got something. This guy's pretty
yep.
good. Who is this Cole Palmer dude? And my word, he's just gone on leaps and bounds, which is phenomenal. And it's great, following you, Sumeet, on social media, on X, tweeting about Chelsea from afar. And I tell you what, you are as hungry and as passionate as some of those folk down in West London, man. I'm in Oxfordshire. I'm in a small town on the River Thames
Yeah,
called Henley, and there's a lot of Chelsea fans around here because we are so close to the west end of London. We're probably about 35 miles away, so it's
yeah.
it's quite easy to get to Stamford Bridge from where I am. And you are arguably more passionate than some of those. Maybe they're used to the Jose Mourinho Chelseas of yesteryear, but there we are.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. Yeah, I think yeah, I've been following Chelsea since I was 7, 8 years old. Just I got into every sport at the same time. Like 2010-ish, I became a Dolphins, a Heat fan, and a Chelsea fan all in the same year. So but yeah, it's been great. And yeah, I love Stamford Bridge. I've been 4 times, I think. I've been pretty lucky to go. So it's been awesome every time.
Very good. Well, thank you very much. It's been awesome to have you on the show as well. So please check out his fine work, Sumeet Jena from the Phinsider. Sumeet, thank you very much. Enjoy Monday Night Football, hopefully as best as you can. And who knows, we'll get you back on again in the future, maybe to discuss Tua when he's about to make his return for the Miami Dolphins.
For sure, man. Thank you so much. Love being on.
And there he goes, Sumeet Jena from the Phinsider. My thanks to him. Make sure you check out his work. Also, if you are a fan of Chelsea, you're going to want to follow him for his tweets. They're quite amusing following his, well, I guess you're watching along with him throughout the Chelsea games. And he certainly is as passionate about Chelsea as he is the Miami Dolphins. Look, coming up in the next few weeks, of course, the NFL returns to London. Can you believe it is now London week? We're going to be at the event next Saturday with the Vikings, where they're taking over part of central London. We'll be covering the games. I'm accredited, so we'll have plenty of great content, including video content from inside the tunnels, down by the side of the field, and player interviews, everything connected with the whole London event. So we're accredited for all three games, the two at Tottenham and the Jags-Patriots game at Wembley. October is a great month. It's NFL month for us over here in the UK, and we can't wait to share that content with you. So make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube and you follow us on social media at TASS_UK, because all that video content we're going to be sharing with you on those outlets. So Instagram, X, and YouTube. And of course, please subscribe to us via your podcast provider, because we do an audio podcast from each of those NFL London games. So if you go to those games and you know what it's like, you're feeling blue on the Monday because you're like, oh, this time yesterday I was getting prepared for the game, or this time yesterday it was kickoff, or whatever, there was a touchdown being scored, and you want to relive those glorious moments of NFL London. Well, fear not, we have you covered, because we provide an audio content, an audio podcast delivered to your podcast provider that night of the NFL London games. That's right, we work through the night to make sure you have that podcast in your app, phone, however you listen to your podcast, ready for either that Monday morning commute or even that Sunday night if you're so desperate to have it as quickly as possible. So please check us out, the Transatlantic Sports Show. And of course, if you love what you see and what you hear, then please give us a 5-star review and tell your friends about us as well, because that brings sponsors to us and that allows us to create even more better content for you. My name is Anthony Wootton. You can follow me on X at ARWootton, WOOTTON. Coming up very soon, later this week, will be our special episode looking ahead to the Jets at Vikings, the first of those 3 NFL London games. Before you know it, that special podcast recapping that first NFL London game. It's going to be a busy period coming up. You want to stick with us here at the Transatlantic Sports Show. So until next time.